And you may be wondering why someone from the US, who is typically focused on aircraft, is introducing a conversation tonight on maritime strategies. I promise you, at the end, it is ultimately relevant. You've likely heard a lot this week about the challenging environment in the Indo-Pacific region, whether it be recent political developments, tensions, or the criticality of supply routes and key materials. The need to think differently about how we ensure stability and security in this region is clearer now, more so than it has ever been. The threats we face from our adversaries have changed, and they will continue to constantly evolve. Nowhere is this more apparent than here in the Indo-Pacific region, where the US national security strategy has cited as the most consequential, a clear recognition of the challenging times we're in. A little over a decade ago, who could have imagined air bases and seaports popping up across the South China Sea? And yet, that's exactly what is happening. And the contested geography and the associated logistics challenges it creates are real, and they're here to stay. Those of you here in India no doubt know this, and you feel it deeply, as you are largely surrounded by waters that have served as a vital trade route between the East and the West for centuries. Today, those sea routes have even greater geostrategic significance. 2/3 of the world's economy goes through the Indo-Pacific, 2/3. It's a staggering figure, and it demonstrates the truly global nature of this discussion. To give further context to the situation, look at the operational growth of China's Navy. 2006, 10 years before the inaugural Raisina Dialogue, China owned a fleet of 221 ships and submarines. At that time, the US Navy inventory stood at 282. Today, China has amassed a battle force of over 370 ships and submarines, the world's largest by far. We see coercion, we see aggression, we see competition occurring in this region, both militarily and economically. And in response, we need to reshape the environment with a focus on strategic deterrence. So how do we do this? While maybe overly simplistic and definitely not new or novel, I believe the solution continues to be partnership, a tightly interconnected and interoperable partnership. To me, that looks like building an integrated and cohesive deterrent capability in the Indo-Pacific, and doing so with like-minded partners, allies, and friends to outpace the threat. We find ourselves today in a dynamic environment that requires information, protected information, and to do that, it means increasing interoperability across forces, across domains, those domains that we all operate in, including understanding the relevance of time across all domains of air, sea, land, space, and cyber. A great recent example of what this looks like occurred in August of last year with Exercise Malabar off the east coast of Australia. There, we witnessed the joining together of ships, submarines, and aircraft from the Indian Navy, the Royal Australian Navy, the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force, and the United States Navy. The sea phase specifically enabled high-intensity exercises across the air, surface, and undersea domains. It honed warfighting skills, and it enhanced interoperability between partners to understand and enhance advanced maritime operations. That exercise showed how partnerships can and do work, and what's more, it was visible. And that sends a message far and wide in and of itself. It also shows we can bring different assets to the table. Not everyone has the same capabilities, and that's okay. Maybe it's even preferable because it allows us all and forces us all to leverage each other's strengths. So while today's panel focuses on maritime strategies, we can appreciate how that strategy is interwoven into land strategies, air strategies, and space strategies. In today's world, there really is no room for independent operations of services and nations across these domains. Our adversaries will challenge us across all of the domains, and we simply must be prepared. Integration is also required because current warfare is a convergence of the old and the new, kinetic and non-kinetic. Everything's on the table, so we must bring all that we have to the fight. By working together, we can deliver advanced capabilities faster. We can improve our collective posture throughout the theater. We can synchronize operations and activities across domains, and we can improve connectedness across partners. We're all much better together, and it takes unifying ourselves to truly stay ahead of the threat. We know there are sovereign interests to consider, and we also appreciate that trust takes time to build. But we are seeing movement in that direction with new multilateral systems, including the Quad and AUKUS, clear examples. The desire for new alignments is there, and in our interconnected world, there really is no way to avoid it. What does embracing it and taking it to the next level really look like? I suggest it looks like aggressively accelerating the adoption and insertion of 21st century digital technologies. And it looks like doing so through a standards-based, modular, open architecture approach that allows allies, defense primes, suppliers, and startups alike to work from the same framework to allow greater interoperability and data sharing as appropriate across all of our armed services. We're facing an increasing threat, complex and digitized geopolitical environment. Today's challenges demand that we deliver network platforms and network solutions to provide unparalleled impact. Only then will we stay ahead of ready with an agile, adaptive, and unpredictable counter to our adversaries' moves. So to finish where we started, that's why it's ultimately relevant that I'm here in front of you today. Someone in industry from the United States who's focused on integration of capabilities and information across all domains and how various platforms from space to subsurface and everywhere in between can become more effective at meeting the security needs of like-minded nations in today's ever-changing environment. The success of the Indo-Pacific region, maritime or otherwise, is dependent on our interconnectedness. And through that interconnectedness, interoperability across platforms, across domains, and across allies. After all, each of us have the same common goal: to ensure the Indo-Pacific's security and stability. And so with that, I'll get off the stage. Let's jump into the discussion and hear from our distinguished panelists. Thank you.
I also want to make a special mention that this is possibly the last Raisina for Admiral John Aquilino. He's been with us for 4 years, for 4 Raisinas. And the last one for Admiral Hari Kumar as well, who's been with us as part of our journey. So they have been strong supporters of the dialogue, both of them. And I want to thank you both for making it possible for us to have very exciting conversations on very important issues. So thank you to both of you. And again, I think it would be fair to applaud them for supporting this dialogue to both of them. And now we can move to business, and I'll be as provocative as I can be. Look, the last 4 years, this long decade, as we have termed it, has seen lots of conflict, has seen lots of technological advancements, has seen lots of strategies and tactics deployed by both states and non-states. We see what has happened in persistent, continuous blockades around Taiwan, trying to disrupt critical supply routes, critical access to critical components that all of us need in a digital future. We have seen the Red Sea developments and how informal militias are offering sea denial. We have seen the Black Sea as a theater of operation, even though it's a continental battlefield where the war is being fought, but the waters and maritime spaces are as important. We are actually going back multiple centuries and going back to very old tactics in the 21st century where we thought we would be fighting a very different war. So it's back to the future in some sense. And I want to really begin this by asking each one of you the same question in a different context, that what have we learned from this long decade? What does it do to our assessments of our capabilities? And how are we thinking of modernizing, upgrading both not only the technology and hardware, but also our partnerships and training and skills? So let me start with Admiral Hari Kumar. Let me start with you, sir. What are the lessons from this decade so far?
Well, firstly, I must tell you that I've just come from the Milan exercise, Milan 2024, where about 51 countries, 51 navies are participating. And we have 15 ships and an aircraft also as part of the exercise. It just shows the level of engagement for partnering to solve the challenges that we face in the ocean. Having said that, I must thank you for for selecting a very apt topic from the Aegean to the South China Sea. And I don't think it's more relevant than the very fact that if you fly from the Aegean to the South China Sea, New Delhi is exactly midway. So I think it reiterates the fact that the center of gravity is probably here in Delhi in the current scheme of things. So I would say that when you have to look back at what has transpired, about, in our national language, Hindi, there is a word kal, which stands for both today as well as yesterday as well as tomorrow. So it is actually, I would say, a civilizational wisdom which says that, if you want to look at the future and learn, you need to learn the lessons of history of what has gone behind in preparing our strategies and working the way forward. So I would say it's very evident right from the history of Athens that all those who have neglected the sea have had to pay a very heavy price, especially if you are a maritime nation. We ourselves have faced the onslaught and have been subjugated for almost 1,000 years, both from the continental as well as the maritime powers, more so by the colonial powers which came in through the sea. So therefore, we cannot afford to forget the fact that you need to invest in maritime capabilities. And when you say maritime power, it consists of all aspects of maritime power. It's not just the military power alone. So that's one thing we need to remember. And when you look at the conflicts that are happening, whether it is Ukraine-Russia or Israel-Hamas, it's very evident that what Clausewitz talked of, the changing character of warfare, is very much true. It's changing like a chameleon. And we need to therefore adapt to the use of modern technology, niche technologies, which are becoming more and more affordable. The cost of such technology is actually becoming exponentially lesser and lesser with greater capability, and the same is being adapted by the non-state actors or even state-funded actors to carry out attacks or asymmetric warfare. So what we see is a sort of a alignment of asymmetric forces against state against nation states. The carrying of the warfare into the sea in such a way that the effect on sea is you're trying to influence it for on ashore, and the use of disinformation and misinformation to a very, very large extent, which is evident in both these both these conflicts. The increasing asymmetry between the cost of attack and the cost of defense. You just have to see the cost of a drone, which is runs into just a few $1,000s probably, and you fire a missile at it. It costs probably a few $1 million. So therefore, there is a tremendous asymmetry between the cost of attack and defense. So these are the factors that we need to keep in mind, and therefore, what you plan and what you build for the future needs to factor all these things. And at the same time, we are cognizant of the fact that the commander at sea should have the ability to deal with both the kinetic, the non-kinetic, the lethal, the non-lethal, as well as manned, unmanned, autonomous. So we are trying to provide options for the commander to see that even if the threat is, below the threshold of conflict, he is able to take it on.
No, in fact, that's an important point, and maybe I can turn to Admiral Aquilino. Like, your assessment of the last 4 years and what does it do to your thinking about conflict and conflict on waters, but maybe add to that question, something that Admiral Hari Kumar mentioned, the asymmetry between attack and defense, and especially in your part of the region, the militias and the formal structures. Are we as agile as those who seek to undermine us? I think the bigger question to you.
Yeah, Samir, thanks. I appreciate you working to pull it up a little bit, because a lot of what everyone wants to talk about are the ways, right? So whether it's swarms of civilian fishing boats disguised, or military militia disguised as fishing boats, whether it's swarms of drones driven by a non-state actor or small state actors to deliver effects, we got to look at what is the purpose of the actions. So whether it's the illegitimate, illegal war that Russia has waged against Ukraine, whether it is terrorist organizations yielding incredible devastation on civilian populations, really it's the why. And the why, as we see it, and as I see it, my secretary has articulated, this is about the change of the world order and the removal of the international rule of law, which governs and has directed and delivered prosperity for nations all across the globe, especially through maritime channels for over 80 years. The imposing of will for political gain currently that authoritarian nations are taking on is the why. And whether the actions that we take are asymmetric, I think the real key and what we're seeing here today, and to Admiral Kumar's point, is it's when we come together and operate together to deliver that conventional deterrence that prevents it. And we have to continue to do that because it's on the edge. Our nation's coming together to articulate a position that says we're unwilling to accept the forceful imposition of rules that counter what we believe in and what we stand for. That doesn't benefit anybody across the globe. So I agree, we ought to talk at a bit of a higher level. We have to do all those things to protect our force, to protect the free flow of commerce, and we have to do it together. So that's where we ought to focus a little bit.
No, thank you. Maybe let me turn to Admiral Vajor. Your Navy and your forces have watched very closely what's happening in the Red Sea and the Mediterranean, as well as the Black Sea. And a new role for France, perhaps? A new direction, a new doctrine? Although one of you on this panel doesn't like doctrines, but I'm still going to use the word.
I don't know if I'm going to speak about doctrine, but just think about to defocus about all what's happened for 1 decade, as you said first. I think that we leave a competition world and entering in a contestation and confrontation world. I mean, we were competitive all together, and it was good, free flow of commerce and something like this, and now everything is contested. Everything is contested, notably the global commons are contested, and the sea is a global commons, but also sovereignty of the states is contested. And sovereignty is not only a small island, place in the world, it's also financial, it's economic, it's everywhere. All the pillars of the sovereignty of the states are contested. Sometimes I said that we are in a new era, the sovereignty conquest of the power. And so everything is moving. And of course, in the global commons, and especially at sea, we are at the friction of that competition. And so for us, what we saw, especially in the Black Sea is really interesting in terms of what's happening. You have one navy with no ships, Ukraine, winning a war against one of the biggest power at sea known, Russia. And there is two things about that. The first thing is maritime superiority is never gained by design. I mean, it means that if you want to have the superiority, you will have to gain your superiority. The second thing is you need access to the crisis place. I mean, it is possible because the Strait of the Turkish Strait is closed. And so that's forced Russia to play with only the ship they have in the Black Sea. They are not able to replenish. And so access is mandatory. Superiority is something we have to think about, because for 10 years now, this maritime superiority was, okay, at the early beginning, surface ships, some aircraft, and that's it, some submarines. But now superiority means from seabed to space, from seabed with the cables, submarines, surface ships, drones, UAV, USV, UUVs, aircraft, satellites, everything is connected. What is the superiority right now? What will be our superiority in 2050 with artificial intelligence, with quantum device, and so on? So how do we have to rethink our superiority in the years to come? What we are seeing now is that we are shifting. And so what will be the shift? That's the main question we have. And of course, what we saw also, that my Navy is, of course, a big Navy, but not the biggest one. And we are not able to do all alone. I fully agree with Admiral Aquilino and Admiral Kumar. We need partnership. We need partnership to ensure and to respond to all the crises we have in the world right now. We need partnership to provide stability, to reduce risk, and to restore confidence. And if we are able to restore confidence and to reduce risk, we are going to protect the maritime flow and then reopening all the access to have a free flow of commerce. That's the main issue we have all together, is to continue what we are doing. Partnership, partnership, partnership.
Admiral Benki, let me turn to you. I think Admiral Kumar mentioned Athens, and I'm going to ask you to bring a historical context to what is happening, the importance of the sea domain, the lessons learned from Athens versus Sparta in old times to what's happening now in Ukraine, in the Black Sea. No navy versus a superior navy, the battle on the seas. How has thinking of conflict changed on the seas? Concept of the denial of sea itself changed. It's Admiral Hari Kumar mentioned that threshold of conflict has increased, but threshold of violence has lowered. So I think that's the asymmetry as well.
Thank you very much, Samir, and it's wonderful to be back here sharing a stage with old friends. And there is nothing said so far that I disagree with at all. But you asked for a kind of historical context. Are we facing something that is fundamentally new? No, not at all. And the rhythms of history demonstrate the impact of the sea on life on land has chimed through the centuries. You can go back as far as the Athenian Wars, the Peloponnesian Wars, where Athens and Sparta battled it out. Sparta, a land-orientated country with a small navy, initially sought to impose its will, and Athens seemed to be on the back foot, but had the inventiveness to find its way through that as a democracy, to think itself through and back out again. And that same ability we see today. One of the things I observe in what we're witnessing and experiencing is something that the theorists have talked about, Clausewitz, Sir Julian Corbett, which is that whilst war is determined finally on land, because that is where we live as people, that contestation, as Nicola talked about it, for territory has to be decided in the place that you're fighting over.
Mhm.
Whereas at sea, you can impact a nation thousands of miles away by what you do. A really interesting example of that was just a few years ago when the Suez Canal was blocked through a peacetime accident involving the Evergreen. It took 5 days to maneuver her away and to open the canal. And the impact on global economy was felt around the world as ships were not able to move their goods. And so what we're seeing, and that was a peacetime event. So if you can see what is happening in the South China Sea, the Red Sea, where people are seeking to impose their will on a global commons, i.e. something we all have access to, then that ripple will be felt far and wide, not just in that point. And this is what differentiates the maritime environment from the land environment, and why navies like ours have to work in partnership, because no one navy can cover all of the points in the world at the same time. And the interdependencies of the effect, the impact that Admiral Aquilino was talking about, for us all are so intertwined that actually we're obligated to work together. And the thing that gives me hope that we will find the solutions, it will be hard work, it will take time and dogged persistence, is that those partnerships, the way we think, inevitably develop the agile, innovative thinking that is necessary to prevail. And we are just having to adapt ourselves for the first time in many decades to the fact that the global commons are contested in a way that they have not been for a long time. And the impact of that, if we do not respond, will be felt by us all, not just by those who are in the locality where that contestation is taking place.
So, to all the 4 admirals on the panel, I would like to give you time to think about a question I'm leaving with you. New domains, for example, the melting of the ice in Arctic and new routes, and what happens there. Is that a new arena for great power contestation? Who is going to prevail? Very important piece of geography that currently is underserved, under-observed, invested into. For right reasons, but are we going to be able to work with other partners in the region to put together a framework? New routes, as we move from oil to rare earth, we are going to have new geographies of vital importance. There might be new Malacca Straits in the future, new choke points that are going to determine future trade, and of course, a new assertive sea power. As Randy's presentation told us, that there is another nation with the most boats on water. And how are you going to now deal with a new era where someone with a different conception of rules has the maritime power to at least deny, if not shape the future? But let me first come to the Air Marshal here, the Vice Air Marshal. Australia, what's happening in the neighborhood? Does it concern you? East China Sea, South China Sea, the buzzing of Taiwan through air power, through ships and through sieges, the ability to block off island nations' engagement with the world. How has that changed Australia's thinking about its neighborhood, its preparedness, its postures? So Air Marshal Robert Chipman, let me turn to you.
Thank you, Samir, and thank you for the invitation to join. It's wonderful to be an aviator on a table with a bunch of admirals, and I think it's an important statement, because even as much as we think about security in the maritime domain, it's not possible to imagine achieving security in the maritime domain without doing so in space and in cyber, on land and in air as well. So we think in the first instance about security in the maritime domain as being an all-domain problem. We have changed dramatically in Australia about our thinking of security in the Indo-Pacific region. We see the Indo-Pacific region as being the epicentre of great power competition between China and the United States. And of course, we've stood tall and tried to uphold our values in Australia, and that we've bought a price for that. We've had to pay a cost. for standing by our values and upholding our principles in Australia through economic coercion, through disinformation, through diplomatic coercion and through military coercion. And we've settled on a principle in Australia that we must disagree where we must, engage where we can on our national interests in order to be able to maintain a strategic balance of power in the Indo-Pacific region over time. We've formed the view in Australia that investment in our own military strength is absolutely vital, and that's vital for deterrence. Admiral Aquilino mentioned before the importance of deterrence. If there's one lesson that I would draw from the last 10 years right across the globe, it's that if deterrence fails, if conflict begins, then the price is catastrophic, and the opportunities for us to win back peace is an extraordinarily difficult challenge for us. So the investment in deterrence up front to avoid a breakout of conflict is money well spent. In Australia, we recognise that as a middle power, a conventional power, we don't have the capacity on our own to deter a great power. And so we see a US presence in the Indo-Pacific region as being absolutely essential. But the US is telling us through their strategy of integrated deterrence that a US military presence alone is not enough. And so it's the network of allies and partners that we build in our region, a like-minded group of nations that are committed to international law, the principles of human rights, and the principles of sovereignty for nations. It's that network of nations that will help us stand tall and deter coercion and deter military aggression in our region. That network is not about forcing choice upon nations, but preserving their option to exercise their sovereign choice in the future.
And Marshall, you see lots of activity around the ASEAN. Many of the ASEAN countries are beginning to rethink their own strategic and security related preparedness and even investments. Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, many of them are looking at partnerships amongst themselves and with other partners. Are you seeing a reorganization underway in what is perhaps likely to be a new geopolitical dynamic?
Samir, I think it's too early to describe it as a reorganisation, but I definitely think nations are looking at their environment and recognising that their interests are best served by maintaining a strategic balance of power. China is a great power, and they will continue to grow and exercise more influence in our region. And I think all nations in our region are coming to the conclusion that they need to invest in their own strength and they need to work with allies and partners in order to preserve the balance of power in our region.
And many of them are choosing to do without necessarily aligning with the US.
I think the ambition is that if we can maintain balance, then we don't need to force that choice.
Okay. Admiral Vajor, let me turn to you. I asked you Arctic, new routes, and a new power on the sea. What does that do to the French Navy?
Arctic. You know, when we spoke about all the challenges we have to face, one was missing: climate change, for sure. And it's not only about Arctic.
Correct.
It's everywhere in the world. I mean, here in the Indian Ocean, storms will provoke some disaster, and so we have to respond that. We have some islands in Indian Ocean. France has more than 1 billion people here in Indian Ocean, so we have to be prepared to climate change. In Arctic, we saw that the northeast route is becoming more accessible, but at the time, I have to say, it is not yet a maritime route, and especially because it's complex, it's dangerous, and there is no logistical hub. There is only one Russian base in the high north, and so with that you are not going to do commerce. But the question to the access of resources like oil and gas will be a competition first, then a contestation, sure. And so we have to be ready to have contestation in the high north, and so we, as French Navy, we deploy very regularly our ships in the high north in order to develop the skills needed in a high area. Not that easy at the time. And you know perhaps that we are working also with Australia in the south for Antarctica, and we have a partnership to supply our command base in Antarctica. And so every year we deployed our ship, and we used to work in icy condition. Not that easy.
Admiral Hari Kumar, to you, as India's economic interests widen to a much larger geography from Latin America to lots of countries in Africa and other parts, how is the naval capacity being, in a sense, galvanized into furthering its abilities?
I'll just quote what Admiral Mahan has said, that the need for a navy rises with the need for peaceful shipping and disappears with it. So if you have a large merchant fleet or trade, then you require a navy. So what we see, today we are the 5th largest economy. In maybe before 2030, we'll be the 3rd largest economy. Now, what does it imply? We'll be importing more, exporting more, doing value addition. And where does this go through? It will all go through the sea. More than 90% of trade as such will go through the sea. And where we contribute in services to the economy, about 45% of that actually goes through the internet, through the undersea cables. So a great chunk of the economy is going to be completely dependent on the sea. And therefore, I see that there is, the risks at sea of the need to maintain maritime security, and it's going to become, more and more challenging. And we need to invest more in assets required for that. While people say that budgets are a challenge, I would say that even if it is just under 2% of the GDP, as the GDP grows, there is definitely adequate, budget to meet the challenges.
Admiral Aquilino, new great power competition in new routes for new resources that need to be served and protected, perhaps in new geographies as the planet changes due to various other climatic conditions. Your Indo-Pacific command may very well widen in its ambit. Please go ahead.
Well, first, Samir, thanks. Let me say from a Navy perspective, right? I'm sitting here in a Navy uniform, but as a Joint Commander, what I work on every day with the team is to bring the joint force together to ensure that those freedom of the seas exist for all, the global commons that my partners talked about. Those are not any nation's rights. Those are designed for all nations to use. So the enablers that link together help provide that freedom of navigation. You cannot operate today without having the ability to operate through space. For those ships all communicate via satellite communication systems. So the linkage of that is something that we take very seriously and work each and every day, whether it be the land component or, as Nick talked about, undersea, on the sea, above the sea, on the land, in space, and cyberspace. So the capabilities certainly change. The adversary works to take advantage of any vulnerabilities. And we always work to ensure we have strengths across all those domains. But the key is the imposition of will on all nations. And, back to my aviation brother's comments, this is not about alignment with the United States. This is about fighting for what's important to us. The strategy of the United States is to deliver a free and open Indo-Pacific. That's not for one nation. That's for all nations. And we have to make sure that we don't lose sight of small issues or claims or intent. We have to understand what the ultimate goal is when those things occur. So to Harry's point, utilizing the international rules to a nation's advantage to ensure they have access and the ability to control portions of the global commons is what we're concerned about and why we have to compete. The imposition of a man-made island to extend your EEZ, so through legal means you can claim that you now own all of the South China Sea. That's a problem for all nations. It's not just a problem for the United States. And we have stood up for all of those nations' rights to be able to prosper and operate in those domains. So I continue to bring this up. We have to understand what's facing us. We have to understand why we take the actions we take. And we have to call out that bad behavior. And these like-minded nations, we have to come together and inform the rest of those other authoritarian states that that will not stand and we do not support it.
Admiral, let me quickly ask you a follow-up question. Partnerships. In your term as the Indo-Pacific commander, what has been the qualitative change and also perhaps a real substantive increase in engagement between, say, the India and the US?
Thanks for that. Again, everybody on this panel agrees. Number one, we can't do this alone, and we are stronger when we're together to ensure that we can deliver the world we want our children and grandchildren to continue to have. For the United States, with all of our partners, it's expanded exponentially over the past 3 years. Some of that is based in the environment. The aggressive action of some nations are forcing other nations to come together to ensure we stand for what we believe in. The US-India relationship has certainly grown exponentially. The capabilities that are co-produced here with India, whether they be C-130s, helicopter pieces, munitions, now GE engines, carrier cooperation, those things have exploded in 3 years. Our ability to share information is like never before. Some of that's based on actions that occurred on the Indian northern border. The sharing of information to understand that my partner's forces are at risk and we are there to help. But that expands across the globe, whether it be the trilateral relationship between the Republic of Korea, Japan, and the United States to defend those treaty allies of which we have a responsibility, whether it be AUKUS and our tie to the UK and Australia, whether it be our linkage to the ASEAN nations, when the Quad nations get together. Those partnerships have expanded. We do 120 exercises a year in the region, 120. Almost every one of them have grown to be more mini and multilateral, and I credit that to my partner, Angus Campbell from Australia. He offered that to the chiefs of defense, and we all signed up to it from the region. But it has exploded. Part of it is because all those nations feel threatened. And the last part is we're unwilling to accept the change unilaterally through a mindset of might equals right. And we do like the way our lives exist today. Freedom of navigation, prosperity, human rights, all those things that we value together.
You know, when we do war games for our young fellows, for example, we create fictional islands, fictional actors, and talk about fictional situations. Why does no one name China? You know, even war games don't name China. Even they create a fictional situation. By the way, these are games conducted by experts. I'm saying, why is it that folks in uniform are so shy of naming the clear and present danger and building capacities to respond to it, and assuring the people that we can count on them to be there when it gets rough? I'm going to turn to you, Admiral Benke, and I'm not asking you a question. That's just my problem with the war game, not with you guys. My question to you is what has been the qualitative change in your engagement with the Indo-Pacific? You have an Indo-Pacific strategy that came out a few years ago. How is the hitting the rubber? How is the rubber meeting the road?
I think there has been a really significant shift in UK thinking over the last decade, but particularly enshrined in our recent integrated reviews looking at our diplomatic, economic, trade, and security engagement and strategy that has recognized that the pacing economic growth in the world is really coming from the Indo-Pacific Asia region. You know, all the statistics, doesn't matter what you read, say that that is where the growth engine is. And today, 40% of the UK and wider European prosperity is connected to the Indo-Asia Pacific region. And therefore, recognizing that formally, anticipating that continued direction of growth and wanting to engage with it is a perfectly natural and important thing to do. But of course, when you make that recognition, that then brings with you obligations and responsibilities to engage with the safety and security of the region, because it's that framework which we've been discussing for the last 45 minutes or so that underpins economic growth that everybody can benefit from. It's not correct that we do not play our part. We cannot be a leading partner by any stretch of the imagination, but we can certainly be a contributing partner and ally in the region to ensuring that safety and security. So for me, as the head of a Navy now that is being pushed by the government to do more in the region, that is one of the big changes we have seen over the last few years. And if you know, there will be people in the audience, experts who have watched Royal Navy deployment patterns over the last 10 or 15 years. We used to pitch up occasionally and then go away for a period of time. Now we're under absolute clear direction, not just to arrive more regularly, but actually to have a persistent presence at sea, on land, and in the air. And that is what we're moving towards. The Carrier Strike Group deployment in 2021 that went to Japan and back despite COVID was a major indication of that intent, to be followed up by another major carrier deployment next year, done with allies and partners in the regions. We want to engage with as many countries, but the very clear intent from across the United Kingdom political leadership is that the region matters to us. We have ties that are economic, that are friendships, that are diplomatic. And in order to maximize that, we have to play a part in ensuring the security and that international framework that we all subscribe to around the world is underpinned. That's the change that it means for us.
And perhaps even the AUKUS arrangement is a indication of your greater engagement in building capabilities in the region.
Well, I mean, AUKUS demonstrates a strategic long-term commitment. I know that there may even be commentators in the room that say, you know, great thing about Britain is they'll turn up and then you know they're going to go away for a while and we can carry on as if they've never been here. And now that is
I mean, in this country, they won't say that.
No.
But
They say other things, Samir, and I know,
So-
because some of it's been said in this room over the last 2.5 days, so that's fine. But the point about AUKUS is it's underpinning a multi-decade strategic relationship, the same with the GCAP partnership that we're building with Japan. It ties us in because we want to be. Now, AUKUS started as an agreement to transfer technology, submarine nuclear propulsion technology. It has grown into so much more, and you can now see the follow-on benefits that accrue from making that sort of a commitment. Huge investment by the United States, bringing us, Australia, and them together. And I think that's the sort of, you know, number of multilateral frameworks that you see tying in that stop discretionary activity in the short term and oblige us to long-term strategic commitment.
I think you've raised an important point, and as we come to the end of this panel, maybe starting with you, Air Marshal, let me ask that question. AUKUS is a clear determination by certain countries that transfer of critical technologies and building capabilities of others is essential for being able to manage the new threat environment and the rise of a new power, who we shall not name. But having said that, are you confident that this arrangement that 3 of the 5 eyes have entered into might extend to a 4th eye as well, who may not be part of the 5 eyes, who shall not be named?
I think we can confidently say AUKUS Pillar 1 at the moment is, AUKUS Pillar 1 is the nuclear-powered submarines, and we can confidently say that that is exquisite technology that the United States and the United Kingdom have chosen to share with Australia to solve an acute operational problem. And that is that conventional powered submarines did not have the range, the stealth, or the speed to provide the deterrent effects that we need in our part of the world. But AUKUS Pillar 2 opens up opportunities. The birth of AUKUS Pillar 2 was recognising that the strategic alignment, not just between nations, but between industries, in order to deliver AUKUS Pillar 1, if we got to 2040 and not expanded on that alignment, not tried to do more with it, we'd have looked back and thought we'd missed an opportunity. AUKUS Pillar 2 is about recognising that the alignment required to deliver a nuclear-powered submarine to Australia opens the opportunity for us to share so much more. And there is opportunity in the future to bring other nations into AUKUS Pillar 2. At the moment, we're focused on delivering across 6 lines of effort. We are impatient for the capabilities that would come with AUKUS Pillar 2, and we are looking for opportunities to expand that.
Admiral Bajor, let me turn to you. Is it important to build capabilities and transfer critical technologies to partners who can help in securing the future?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, I think that if you put partnership on the table as something which is very important, you cannot say, I will not share with you part of my knowledge and part of my skills. And so if you want to work together, you have to share what you are able to share. Of course, sometimes you are not able to share everything. That's true. And we have nuclear deterrence submarine, and so we will not share that for sure. But in terms of technology, of course, we can have very close partnership, and we have very close partnership with some countries, and where we share and where we transfer technology for them to build their own defense industry, and to have also, as Ben say, long-term strategy, which is, I think, in the world where we are, very important for the future.
Let me turn to Admiral Aquilino. What could be some big, bold Indo-US ventures in the near term that could put our navies closer together in managing the new threat environment? But some new ideas, some over-the-horizon thinking that you believe would be useful for us to chase as nations, as navies, as armies, as defense forces?
Yeah, thanks, Samir. I think the integration of unmanned capabilities is probably the thing that would pop immediately in my mindset, right? We watched it being used, again, in Ukraine against the Ukrainians. We watch it being used by the Houthis against commercial traffic. But when that capability and capacity is harnessed by the like-minded nations here, whether it be cooperative aircraft wingmen, whether it be synchronized swarms of munitions, whether it be unmanned undersea capability and unmanned air capability. First of all, we've been experimenting with it for decades now. And we're at a point where I believe the integration of unmanned and manned capabilities as designed and utilized both by each of our nations and then collectively will be an asymmetric advantage. And I think that's a focus that all of us share. Again, technology apart, we share those things. We share more than we don't share, to your last point, right? The F-35 is a great example of the highest end technology from the United States and our industry partners, Lockheed Martin in this case, and sharing it to deliver deterrent effects globally, because there's nothing that compares with it. We will continue to do that. But I think that unmanned aspect and the synchronization with manned capabilities tied with AI, but man in the loop, that's where we're going to see the next set of focus and actions that we will have to really work together to make sure. Because when you look at AI, these like-minded nations sitting up here and the rest that are in the world will use it differently than those authoritarian nations, and that's concerning.
Admiral Hari Kumar, the final word to you. I'll just flip the question a little. How important are partnerships, certainly in terms of acquiring capabilities and technologies and building systems? And equally, how important is indigenous development of technologies for a country as large as India? And where is the balance between building homegrown solutions and partnering with others and acquiring tried and tested solutions that can be deployed immediately? How do you find the balance?
Well, I would say that we have given a commitment to our national leadership that by 2047, when Bharat becomes a developed nation, Bharatiya Nausena also will be a postmodern navy, which is completely Atmanirbhar. So we are working towards that. And that is an area where we are now looking at joint collaboration, and a lot of work is happening with our partners, many of them are present here, to develop jointly in Bharat the latest technology. So I would say we need to have shared technologies. We want to overcome shared challenges. So that's an area where much progress is being seen, but no effort is being spared to encourage MSME, startups, unicorns to come up with solutions which are useful for us. I would like to say that we have this Naval Indigenization Innovation Organization, for example. They have done the Swavilamban seminar last year as well as last year. The Honorable Prime Minister had unveiled 75 challenges. There were more than 1,100 respondents with solutions. We assessed them, and about 118 contracts have been signed. Many of them are world-beating technologies for the first time. Some are force multipliers, and so on. So there is adequate ability within the country to innovate, to indigenize and produce stuff. We need to support them, and which is what we are doing, hand-holding to ensure that we get what we need. At the same time, we are working with our partners as well.
Thank you, Admiral. When we started this conference 2 days ago, we posed the question in our opening segment, Chaturanga, which was the strategy for enforcing order in old times. We had asked, what is the Chaturanga for today? What is the strategy for today to manage conflict, to prevail in contest, to build cooperation, and to create solutions? And I think we've heard this panel say it loud and clear. Partnerships, partnerships, partnerships. And I think that is a good note to conclude this session and to conclude this conference, Raisina 2024. Partnerships matter. They give us resilience, capacities, and capabilities to navigate an ever-changing and dynamic world. Please join me in applauding this wonderful panel for their contribution. And gentlemen, thank you for all you do for all our countries. Thank you for keeping us safe. And to all of you, thank you so much for your time, attention, effort, energy, for being with us, staying with us. Do join us again next year. And if some of you are still around, have fun this evening or whatever is left of it. So best of luck and take care. Travel well.